Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Fireside Chat, our October Fireside Chat. I'm very excited to have Taylor Otwell here with me today. Fun fact, I was just telling him he was the very first guest of our Fireside Chats. We actually kicked them off with him. And I'm very excited to have him as my guest today once more. We'll try a different approach today. We'll focus completely on your questions, so we don't have any discussion prepared up front. So if you want to ask anything and you haven't shared your question yet, my team will share the link with you in the comments. So please use that to ask whatever you want, but try to focus on Laravel, not Taylor's personal life. Just a quick intro for everyone who's new here. These are our monthly events. Adeva's mission is to enable work without boundaries by connecting remote engineers with companies across the world. And these are part of that mission by bringing people we all look up to and want to learn from, so that we can do that without having to be in the world's leading tech centers and relocate somewhere. Okay, let's, Taylor, welcome. Let's start with a quick intro from you about, the journey with Laravel and how it became what it is today. And then we'll dig into the questions that people have.
Okay, thanks for having me. I created Laravel back in 2011 and put it out on GitHub. I did not expect that many people to use it, honestly. I wrote some documentation for it, but then slowly but surely people started enjoying it, started using it, and I've been developing it ever since. I went full-time working on Laravel in 2015 after I built Laravel Forge and went on to launch Laravel Envoyer and Spark and Nova and Vapor and other tools that helped us build basically a full-time staff around Laravel, and now we have 7 people and myself working on Laravel full-time, and that's what I've done for the last few years.
That's great. Can you share a bit about the news and what's going on at the moment?
Sure. So right now we are working on, or we're starting to really focus on some Laravel 10 features. We do a yearly release of Laravel, usually in February or early March. And so right now we have started thinking about Laravel 10 and what we want to accomplish there for that yearly release. We've also started working on planning Laracon events. I tweeted about this yesterday, but planning a Laracon event for the late spring, early summer in the US next year. And we also have Laracon events in Europe in January and then in India in February. So it's going to be a busy start to the year with Laravel 10 and plus 3 different conferences to start the year. So that's been my focus the last few weeks.
Nice. And I believe everyone is looking forward to those.
Yeah.
Great. So let's start with the questions. I'm going to go through them as they're rated on Slido. Also, don't forget to rate if you see a question that you're interested in. That way it will bump up. So the first one, are there still pain points that you're trying to solve with Laravel, or are you mostly making the developer experience improvements at this point?
There are still some pain points that we see. Like recently, we released a new syntax for defining mailable objects. This was sort of a pain point that I felt personally. I just didn't really enjoy how they were built or how they looked or how they were structured. So I recently rewrote an alternative syntax for writing mailable classes that I felt like was a little bit, or made a little bit more sense, and it was easier to test and easier to inspect what the mailable objects, kind of what properties they had. And so yeah, that was actually just a few weeks ago. So we do still find pain points even 12 years later. And then, yeah, we're always trying to improve the developer experience. We come across some things as we use Laravel to build Forge, to build Vapor, things like that. We notice some things ourselves. And then, of course, we get pull requests every day. We probably get I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 pull requests a day to Laravel that we go through, and I go through those every morning. And of course, those are also usually trying to address some sort of pain point. So yeah, it's still a really big focus, and I think has always been a focus of Laravel to make development as easy as possible. So we're always looking for things like that.
Do you have some approach to get feedback from people, or some structured way to do that?
Not really structured. Sometimes we just ask for feedback on social media, on Twitter, things like that. We also receive feedback on GitHub. And sometimes if I'm writing a new feature, like the mailable feature, I will make the pull request and then post it to Twitter and ask for feedback. That's about as structured as it gets as far as gathering feedback goes. We don't have sort of a board where you can vote or anything like that. So mainly through social media.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the next question is Laravel scalable?
I think so. I hope so. So there's a few ways you can scale Laravel. So the one way, that kind of the more traditional way, is to use something like Forge to build servers and build load balancers and put Laravel across multiple servers to handle more traffic. Kind of the way lately that I would deploy an application that needs to scale is something like Laravel Vapor or some kind of serverless solution that's auto scaling. That way you can get a whole lot of scale out of a Laravel application, as well as take advantage of things like Amazon's RDS proxies, which can handle a lot of database connections, or even something like DynamoDB, which is a serverless database. So, people are using Laravel to run very high scale applications, things like Fathom Analytics, which handles a whole lot of traffic, more traffic than we do. So yes, Laravel can definitely scale. As long as you pay attention to your server infrastructure, your database indexes, and caching and things like that.
Okay, next. What's the status of Beep? Will we ever see it released, or you changed your mind about it?
I haven't given up on Beep entirely. I haven't given up on Beep entirely. I was just talking to Caleb Porzio about Beep yesterday, actually. I told him that I wanted to try Beep on a Livewire 3 that he's been working on and that he kind of talked about at Laracon Online whenever that was, a month ago or so, because I was really excited about it, and I've never used Livewire to build a real application, so I haven't totally given up on Beep. I might try Livewire 3 with Beep when it comes out. Beep was also a way for me to just try new things in the framework, to find pain points, like we talked about earlier. It wasn't always essential that I release it because it's not a tool like Forge or Vapor. It was more of a fun project. So I was mainly using it to find things in the framework that I didn't like or that didn't feel all that great. But we'll see. I still think it's a fun project that I would like to release at some point. I just could never get it. I'm just kind of perfectionist when I'm building things, and I could never get it like just right how I wanted it. So I never released it, but maybe someday. I haven't totally given up.
Can you give some context for people who are not familiar with it?
Yeah, so Beep was just, I think I teased a tweet about this project called Beep that I was working on. And it was sort of a productivity app, collaboration app. It wasn't related to Laravel at all, actually. It just used Laravel under the hood, but it was just a fun app to keep up with your team in what you're working on, share updates about what you're working on, and things like that. And so I was building it in Laravel, and the intention was to open source the entire app when I was done, and it would serve as sort of a learning resource for Laravel of what an entire app built in Laravel looks like from start to finish, because I've never released really an entire application open source of how I would build a Laravel application. So that was the goal. And we pretty much finished the app. It was designed by a designer and coded, and everything was done, but I wasn't totally in love with it, so I didn't release it. So, but again, I haven't totally given up, and I have some fresh ideas for it. So maybe Livewire 3 will get me energized again.
Cool. Have you ever thought of merging Forge and Envoyer into a single product?
A little bit. So originally I wrote Forge in 2014. And then when I wrote Envoyer just the next year in 2015, the goal was to be able to serve any PHP project, not just a Laravel application. So I wanted people to be able to deploy Symfony applications or Zend applications or whatever tool they were using. And I worried that if I branded Envoyer as Laravel Envoyer or like put it in Forge, that people would be like, oh, this is just for Laravel applications, and they would never use it for their other PHP applications. So that's why they became two separate products. So we've considered bringing zero downtime deployment into Forge, which we may do soon. We've sketched out ideas on that, on how it would work and things like that. But I don't think like we will ever merge Envoyer into Forge and take down Envoyer, just because it already has a decent number of customers, and that would be confusing and hard to do. But we may build Envoyer's features into Forge at some point.
Is it difficult to maintain both at the same time?
It's not too difficult. Envoyer is pretty low maintenance. It's definitely our most low maintenance product, just because it doesn't have quite as many features. It's more limited scope. So it's easy for us to maintain Envoyer, whereas Forge has lots of customer support, lots of emails every day. It takes much more time.
Okay, next. What are your thoughts on having a schema method available in the model along with a command for generating migrations, similar to Symfony?
I haven't thought about it too much. When I first wrote Laravel's migrations, it was very much inspired by Ruby on Rails migrations. So that's kind of why it feels how it feels. I haven't really experimented a lot with other forms of defining the database schema. So I don't have a lot of experience there. It would be something we would have to just explore fresh, but migrations were always sort of inspired by Rails. So that's where they kind of came from.
Okay, what feature of Laravel was the most hard to implement?
Oh, definitely Eloquent. I've rewritten Eloquent probably 3 or 4 times. I wrote it, of course, initially, and then I rewrote it when I got hired to work at Userscape, when we were building customer support software, because I don't think it even supported eager loading a relationship. Everything was lazy loaded. So it just wasn't as featured as it is now. So I rewrote it then, and then I think I rewrote it a few years later, but it's definitely the most complicated and hardest to write piece of Laravel. And it's one of those things where like the first 80% of writing an ORM like Eloquent is really fast, and you feel like, oh, this is much easier than I expected. But then like the last 20% of the tool are extremely hard and complicated. So anytime I get a PR in Eloquent, I have to admit I'm a little scared to go review it because it's so scary in there. But overall, I think it works pretty well. And but I definitely would not want to have to write it again from scratch. It would be pretty tough.
I guess there are a lot of things that you miss with the initial structure, and then you just realize, oh, I need this and I need this. Someone asking for your thoughts on a DDD project structure when initializing a project.
Yeah, I've been asked this a few times. It's a little hard for us to do because DDD project structures, from my understanding, seem very application specific, depending on like what your application is dealing with. Like if it's dealing with airline flights, your project structure deals, with flights and tickets and airports and things like that. Whereas something like Forge has a very different domain concept, so all your folder structure might look different. So it's hard for us to build one general project structure for all DDD based projects. It's something I think that the individual developer sort of has to modify the directory structure for their own application needs. So we've tried to make Laravel's directory structure pretty flexible, where you can put things pretty much anywhere as long as you register your routes, with the right namespace and things like that. Things should pretty much just like work. But it's hard for us to generalize DDD into a framework that fits everyone. I think a lot of people would have a lot of different opinions on what it should look like, and it would be a lot of debating and really hard decisions to make.
Okay, moving through this. What about Valet? Why is it no longer featured in the Laravel version 9 docs? I was actually wondering the same thing.
So when I was working on the documentation a few months ago, and it felt like we had so many different ways to get started with Laravel that it felt a little bit confusing at the beginning. So Valet is still in the sidebar under packages, but when you go to the installation docs, I really wanted it to be like one simple way to install Laravel, instead of, oh, you can use Valet, or you can use Homestead, or you can use Docker, or you can use PHP Artisan Serve. And it felt very like overwhelming for someone new. So I still actually use Valet. Personally, I love Valet, but I think I can't remember what the default is in the docs. I think it might just be PHP Artisan Serve. No, yeah, so under your first Laravel project, it's like composer create project Laravel, then you change the directory, then PHP Artisan Serve. So we tried to make it like really simple for the simplest use case, and then it talks about other things like Docker and things like that. But yeah, it just felt like so many choices, it was overwhelming. So anyway, that's why.
Makes sense. Would you consider bringing InertiaJS into the Laravel family for a package used by so many? Would it benefit from the support of Laravel's core team?
Yes. So that is something that Jonathan Rennig, who's the creator of InertiaJS, and I have been talking about, and I think probably will kind of happen. I actually rewrote all the documentation for InertiaJS maybe 2 months ago and sent it to Jonathan, and that's about to be released along with Inertia 1.0, maybe next week, maybe the week after that. So pretty soon. I know Jonathan was fixing one more bug that he wanted to fix before releasing Inertia 1.0. And then, I rewrote all the docs and told him, we can devote attention to this at Laravel. We can look at it. We can help maintain it. So I think it will be more embraced by us here at Laravel, and that we'll try to help maintain it going forward, because as Jonathan has been mainly focused on Tailwind, CSS, where he works, he hasn't had as much time to work on Inertia. So I think that's something that we're going to be helping out with. So yeah, we are trying to kind of adopt that project a little bit more.
That's great. There was one question that I saw earlier. It was related to the choice of Tailwind as opposed to Bootstrap, which is used by so many people who use Laravel. So because it's connected a bit to this, I wanted to follow up with that before we go into something else.
Yeah. So the main reason for doing that was because we mainly use Tailwind here at Laravel. We actually don't use Bootstrap at all on any of our products. So we just wanted to use the things that we use and that we like and recommend here at Laravel. It has been a little bit of a controversial decision, I know, because people like the the kind of components in Bootstrap like card and alert and things like that. So we have continued to maintain our Laravel UI package, which still uses Bootstrap 5, I think, and continued to make that available and kept it updated for Laravel 9 and things like that, so people can continue to use that. And I think we'll continue to maintain that even in Laravel 10, so that people have an option that like to use Bootstrap. I would not be entirely opposed to having a Bootstrap version of Laravel Breeze. I personally am not quite sure how to write it, so I'd probably need help maintaining that. And it's a little bit, it's a slightly bigger task because we have Livewire Breeze, and we have Vue Breeze, and we have React version of Breeze, and they would all need a Bootstrap version, all three. So it's actually kind of three different sets of templates that we would have to write it in, which makes it a bit of a bigger job. But if someone was willing to help do it, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it. I just don't know how to do it myself because I haven't used Bootstrap in probably 4 or 5 years. So I just don't really know how to make it look right or look the same as the other stacks.
Okay, this was a great answer for whoever asked the question. If you're willing to help, jump in. What excites you most in the PHP world right now? Either new features coming in new releases, or certain packages, extensions that you might have seen and like to use?
I think people are continuing to experiment with things like Octane and Roadrunner. Like I just saw at SymfonyCon, Kevin Douglas released a new application server for PHP that's sort of similar to Roadrunner, I guess, where it keeps your application in memory and helps you serve requests much faster than booting the application up for every request. That's very similar to what we do for Laravel Octane, so we may be able to build a driver for his application server that works with Octane, because we already support Roadrunner and Swool PHP. So I think that's pretty interesting. For Laravel 10, we are working on a project to add more type hints on methods, as well as return types to methods in Laravel's application structure and in the stubs generated by Laravel. So this has been a project that Nuno has been working on. And of course, he originally created Larastan, the static analysis tool for Laravel. So that's, going to be another thing I'm kind of excited about for Laravel 10 is when I first wrote Laravel, we used all of the type hinting features that were available in PHP at the time, but that was back in PHP 5.3, and we didn't have as many, we didn't have return types, we didn't have even like a string type or anything like that. So we just used the type hints that were available to us. But with Laravel 10, we're actually going to update the skeleton entirely to use all of the available type hint features in PHP as of today.
Did you wonder at any point if it was a wise choice to go into PHP being a .NET developer?
I kind of got into PHP by accident because I really wrote Laravel for myself, and I didn't really expect it to be popular because there were already several popular PHP frameworks like Symfony and Zend and CodeIgniter. And I just didn't really expect it to go anywhere. But then once it got popular, I was, now I'm a PHP framework maintainer. But I don't regret it. I actually still enjoy using PHP just fine. I think the community is really fun, and it's nice to be a part of it. So no, I don't really regret it or have any bad feelings about it.
That's a great answer for everyone who is hesitant about Laravel because of PHP. Perhaps a newbie question. What are the current limitations of Laravel? For what types of projects is it good or bad for? I don't think it's a newbie question, though.
Well, of course, it's good for most web projects. Most applications people write, Laravel would probably be fine. I'm not familiar with, maybe there are certain types of applications like trading stocks or trading Bitcoin or that maybe Laravel is not good for. I'm not really sure because I've never built those kinds of applications. But I think if you're building, traditional web applications that have, user input and save stuff in the database and validate data and just traditional web applications, I think Laravel is built to handle most of those use cases. But of course, for special cases, maybe it's not so good. I'm not really sure. But if you're building something like Forge or I don't know, a social media network or something like that, then I'm sure Laravel is fine for those kinds of applications.
What is the status of the job market for Laravel, as far as you know?
I know that from what I've heard, people are very desperate to find good Laravel developers. Most of the people I talk to are, still hunting for developers actually, and they feel like quality Laravel developers are something that they really, really need. So I know there are definitely jobs out there. That being said, I don't, I haven't been looking for a job myself recently, so I'm not really sure what the market is totally like. But I know that there's definitely still companies out there. Even our Laravel partners, for example, is what I'm referring to. People like Titan or Vehicle or the people we have on the partners directory tell me that they're looking for Laravel developers. And I think with the conferences starting back up, I know companies always come to Laracons looking for developers. That's a big reason that people sponsor and come to the conference and have booths and tables at the conference. So, that's another good opportunity to network with potential employers as well.
I can testify to this as well. We have huge demand for Laravel developers, and also a large network of Laravel developers, just because of the community and how people are interacting with the framework and with each other. So I think it's a very nice place to be in at the moment, and seeking for a job in Laravel as well.
Yeah.
Have you thought about porting Laravel to another language? Nuno seems very enthusiastic about Rust. Interesting.
Sometimes it would be a very big job. The only language I've actually considered doing that for is something like JavaScript, just because it's probably the language that we know the best besides PHP. I've never used Rust, although it seems good for certain types of projects. I'm not familiar with using it for building web applications, I guess. So no, I haven't looked at that, but we have considered. I've at least kind of considered or fantasized about porting it to JavaScript at times, but it's just again like. Porting all of Eloquent to JavaScript sounds like a lot of work, or all of the queue system, or all of the validation system. It's just a lot of time I think that would take. And then it's not only that, but needing to port things like Laravel Nova, Laravel Horizon, Laravel Spark, Cashier, Socialite, Echo, like everything has to be ported, and that's like 12 years of development work that has to be ported to JavaScript. So I think it's unlikely actually that we would ever try to do that. I think we'll continue to work in PHP and make Laravel better for PHP developers, and someone else, I guess, will have to do the job of building Laravel in another language.
You really are a perfectionist, so you don't think about starting small and then adding new things. Yeah, but no,
Yeah.
we need to port everything at once.
Yeah.
I ran into a framework, I think it was Adonis JS or something for JavaScript, and it was following Laravel structure back at the time. So I'm not sure how far along it is right now and if they're maintaining it, but
yeah,
I think there are people who are very enthusiastic about Laravel and want to see it in different languages.
Yeah, I think so too. It seems like in JavaScript, I've seen the framework you're referring to as well, and I think it's the most like Laravel in the JavaScript world. But a lot of the really popular JavaScript frameworks like Next.js and things like that are not as back-end focused, it seems like, and they have a very different structure to Laravel. So I think that Adonis tries to follow Laravel, feel a lot like Laravel compared to other projects.
Is it still out there?
I think so, as far as I know. I still see it when people ask for recommendations for Laravel like frameworks in JavaScript. I still see it mentioned. So I think it's still around. Yeah.
Nice. What are your thoughts about PHP core migrating to a more strict language?
I think it's okay as long as I think it's fine actually, as long as I would prefer not to have many breaking changes in the language. And I know I'm probably not the best person to talk about breaking changes because I've made my fair share of them in Laravel over the years. But in the language itself, it's I think if there's a breaking change, it probably needs to be for a very good reason. So for example, like passing null to the count function used to return 0, but it was eventually made to throw an error. Things like that, I think, are not really the best kinds of breaking changes because they're kind of very minor changes. But I'm actually fine with PHP core implementing more strict features that people can opt into. I think in application code, when you're writing your own application, it's fine to be as strict as you want to be. In the framework, the only reason sometimes we're not so strict is because we only get to release a framework release once a year. So if we make a mistake choosing a type that is too strict, and we may have to wait 9-10 months to be able to fix it, so to speak. So sometimes if we're not totally sure if we're going to allow a more flexible for like an argument on a method, we're not sure if we're going to accept more than one type, we just will leave the type off because otherwise we may be stuck for a year until we can release a fix for it. So we're not usually as strict in the framework, but in our own application code, for example, when I was writing Laravel Beep, it was actually very strict. It had all type hints, it used Larastan, it used return types, all of that. So it was very different than how I would write the framework code. But yes, to answer the question, I think it's fine. I think it's good as long as the breaking changes are, minimal.
What are some of the best decisions you made that helped Laravel really hit off technical community or whatever?
Being friends with Jeffrey Way, being friends with Dale Reese. I think other people made Laravel take off maybe more than I did. So, of course, when Laravel first started, that was people like Dale Reese and Sean McCool, who wrote books and video courses and tutorials about how to use Laravel. And I wasn't really writing a lot of that at the time. I was just writing the documentation. And I think they helped recruit people into the Laravel world. And then, of course, later, Jeffrey Way with Laracast. That was not something that, that was just his idea. It's not something we really worked on together. It's just something that he did and made really great. So I think, I was just lucky to have people that were making good educational content about the framework, and that really helped me out a lot. It wasn't necessarily any one decision I made. I just tried to make the documentation as good as possible and to make Laravel as easy to use as possible, and that was sort of my contribution.
You made the right people fall in love with the framework, and then they did the rest.
Basically, yeah.
Do you think that Laravel has become more and more opinionated over the years, and do you consider taking a step back from that direction?
I think it's about the same, really, as it has been. Laravel was always a little bit opinionated, as far as, I don't know, I'm trying to think like what people mean by opinionated. I think some people mean some of like the front end opinions like Tailwind and things like that makes Laravel opinionated, but I consider all of that a little bit optional. You don't have to use things like Laravel Breeze or Laravel Jetstream. But Laravel has always, been a little bit more of an opinionated framework. I don't think it's really gotten more or less opinionated over the years. It stayed pretty much the same. So I don't know. I'm pretty happy with where we're at in terms of that right now, but we'll see about the future.
No plans to take a step back. What are some things that you would like to see introduced in PHP?
I think I would like to see, well, one thing I would like to see soon is the Laravel WebSockets package, version 2.0. I feel like I would really like to see a really good PHP-based WebSockets package that people can install as open source and they can use it on their projects. And it has good documentation and it's maintained, and so that you can pair it with Laravel's event broadcasting and Echo and things like that. We have Laravel WebSockets 1.0, but they've been working on 2.0 for a couple of years. It's more scalable and you can distribute it across multiple servers. So I hope that comes out soon. If it doesn't, maybe someone else should take a stab at it. I don't know. So that would be one thing. Oh, I know I had an idea the other day that I was really hoping to see. But the WebSockets real-time stuff has been kind of the main thing recently.
If you remember it, you can share it later.
Yeah.
There was one question about permission manager in Laravel. So do you think Laravel deserves built-in permission manager?
Maybe. Maybe it's like a package or something. I usually use, our permissions have been pretty simple, like in Laravel Vapor, for example, which has probably the most robust permission system out of all of our products. It's pretty simple where all the users' permissions are just stored in a database column. I think that's like a JSON structure that we inspect. So we haven't gone much further than that. I know there's some pretty good packages out there written by other people for this sort of thing that are pretty popular. But if we didn't build it in the core of the framework, it's possible we could build a package around that at some point. You know, that's like an official Laravel package. But we haven't done it yet.
Yeah, there's this very good package by Spatty, I think, and a lot of people are using that.
Right. Yeah. They write so many packages that you know, it makes my life easier.
Let's see what else.
It is sort of an interesting thing. It is like an interesting phenomenon where even if the package exists, like the Spotty package exists, some people, they just really want, you know, Laravel to write it. Even if the package is good, they want Laravel to write it instead, which I really like it if, you know, someone else can write a really good high quality package, because it makes it easier for us to maintain our things and not have to be overwhelmed maintaining hundreds of packages. So yeah,
that's why it's open source, right? Community needs to contribute.
Yeah.
I'm losing the questions because of the ratings that people leave live. So let's see. There was one about the features. Oh, here it is. Would you like to see some Laravel core features being included natively in PHP? If you do, which ones?
That's an interesting question. Let me think. Maybe some of the string functions, or like I think I can't decide. Sometimes I think maybe collections would be interesting in PHP, but once something is built in PHP, the language, it's hard to add on to it, and we can't expand it really. I'm not sure. The string helpers and the collections come to mind, possibly. Maybe even actually a really easy to use HTTP client, kind of like a Guzzle or you know, things like that would be kind of interesting, built into PHP, just because it's so common. Yeah, so those are a few things that come to mind.
And which feature from other programming languages or frameworks would you like to see in Laravel? If there are any, because you've perfected it so much.
Of course, one of PHP's, everyone knows one of PHP's kind of common limitations is that it is single-threaded and can't normally do two things at the same time. That would, of course, open up a lot of interesting possibilities in PHP if we could have multiple threads doing work at the same time to do to make things faster. So that would be really interesting, and probably the biggest feature I think that PHP could implement would be that. Let me think. Other programming language features. That's really the
Maybe
most
that's the thing that
obvious
you wanted
ones.
to mention.
What's that?
Maybe that's the thing that you wanted to mention before that you couldn't remember.
Yeah, maybe.
The multi-thread.
Yeah, that's the most obvious feature that comes to mind that I think would be really interesting.
Are you aware if Laravel is taught in an academic context anywhere?
Yeah, it has been.
University.
And there was actually a course on web development taught at Harvard here in the U.S. That used Laravel. They used Laravel to build an application, and then they used another framework to build the same application, and then compared the differences. I can't remember what the other framework was.
Nice.
It may have been in JavaScript or something like that, but they actually emailed me and requested copies of my book and maybe a discount code to Laracon, so all the student or to Laracast, I'm sorry, so all the students could look at that. But that was maybe 3 years ago. So yeah, it has been before. I'm not sure if that course is still available or still going on, but it definitely has been before. And sometimes it's actually not that rare for me to get an email from a college instructor, not just in the US, but around the world, asking for coupons so that their students can sign up for Laravel Forge and build servers for their projects and things like that. That's actually pretty common.
Do you have some specific discount for students, or?
Yeah, we have a student discount. So if you email us from your student email address, then we have a coupon code we give to all students.
That's great. I know universities in Macedonia are also have Laravel in their curriculums.
Okay, nice.
Oh, would you ever come back to Reddit? What would make it a better community?
Maybe I am on Reddit and just under a different username. No, I actually don't post in the PHP or the Laravel subreddit really. I do use Reddit casually just to read about other interesting topics, music or gaming or something like that. But I don't really participate in the programming subreddits. But I am on Reddit, but it's just not my username is not myself. It's anonymous.
What do you think would make it a better community?
What I think would make a better community on Reddit or just everywhere?
Yes, that was part of the question, actually. What would make Reddit a better community for people like yourself?
Yeah, I think anytime that people can post anonymously, they might say things they might not otherwise say if they had their name and face attached to the comment. So the internet is always going to be a little bit toxic sometimes, just because people are, don't have to face any responsibilities for their actions or consequences or whatever. Reddit, the Laravel subreddit is actually not bad. There's a lot of good content on there too. It's just hard, I think, when you're an open source maintainer to face a lot of negative attention, because it sort of takes away your energy and you don't want to work on the project that much anymore if you feel like it's just kind of draining your positive vibes and people are complaining and things like that. But I think that's why I don't really participate in that all that much. But at the same time, it's important to remember that actually most people are totally like what you're building, and that the people that are complaining are actually a very small minority of people that just seem very loud. So I don't know. Another thing is I just don't have a lot of time to go out there and talk like I used to, just because we have employees here and I'm busy on Slack chatting with them and planning things and working on things. So it just doesn't come up as much.
How different is life as manager as opposed to individual contributor?
It's very different. Even back when it was just myself and Mohammed, our first employee, we were just in Telegram. We didn't even use anything like Slack or anything like that. It's very different because I always have to be planning for the next thing for people to work on. And once one person finishes one project, another person is finishing their project, and then I have to work with them. So it's very different from programming, but I do kind of enjoy just working with other people, helping them figure out what to work on next and planning things, as long as I can actually come up with decent ideas for us to work on. And actually the employees pitch a lot of their own ideas. Sometimes in our Basecamp or our project management app, we'll just have an open thread where people can suggest what they want to work on. And we'll do those things. Like James Brooks is just finishing up a dark mode for Laravel Forge, and he's also working on a new permission system for Laravel Forge. And both of those things were his idea; weren't my idea. So we have a lot of employee feedback too.
That's nice. What steps would you recommend for developers that plan to use microservices with Laravel?
What tests? What?
Steps
Steps
for using it. Yeah.
Ooh, I'm not sure. I haven't done a lot of microservices. We only have 2 small microservices here at Laravel. One of them is the service that issues SSL certificates for Forge servers, and the other one is the Envoyer heartbeats feature is powered by a few different microservices that are load balanced. But I've never deployed like dozens of microservices, so I'm not sure that I'm really an expert in that topic. So yeah, it's just not something we've done a lot of here.
Okay. What about implementing repository pattern? I know that Eloquent is so nicely built that you have a lot of the features built in, and sometimes when you make a decision to go with repositories, you're missing out on a lot of what Eloquent offers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we use repositories sometimes here at Laravel. We don't actually try to hide the fact that they are returning Eloquent models, or that we don't try to make them return some sort of generalized object that is not an Eloquent model. We just use repositories in order to, if we have a complex query that we're needing to invoke from multiple places, we'll just put that in a repository and then share the repository across those classes, like inject the repository into, for example, 3 or 4 different controllers, and then they can each call that method to use that to build that complicated query. But we don't really try to, like I said, return objects that are plain PHP objects. We always return Eloquent objects. I think if I was going to do the repository pattern and try to return plain PHP objects, that of course is a lot more work. And I would just have to weigh, is it really, are the benefits really outweighing all the extra work of trying to do that? I just usually embrace Eloquent and use Eloquent and accept that is my database tool.
You've been mostly working on Laravel ecosystem projects. But when it comes to switching the database, or actually Eloquent can connect to another database and still work fine.
Yeah, as long as you're not switching to like MySQL to MongoDB or something totally different. As long as you're switching to Postgres or SQL Server or something that Eloquent can handle, hopefully will be fine. So yeah, but if you're switching to something else and that's radically different, then of course you're going to have more work. But
you probably won't be aware that you would need that when you start. So
probably
I guess you'd start with Eloquent, and then if you really notice some need of a repository, just create it in addition.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on improving Laravel in the e-commerce space? Laravel developers tend to gravitate to Shopify when selecting platforms and frameworks.
Mm-hmm. We have thought about it. It's something that David Hemphill and I have thought about a little bit, and he was my kind of partner building Laravel Nova. It's an interesting product space because obviously it's a very valuable and big market for developers, but it's also a very big project. So we'd have to really be sure that we wanted to commit to that. But yes, we have thought about it, but we haven't actually started working on anything entirely. So, but it is a possibility, I guess, in the future that we would explore something like that. But again, it's just a very big project, so I think it's maybe a little bit unlikely. But we'll see. I don't want to totally close the door on it because we have internally discussed it before. We just have never started working on it.
When you get to a point where you can't think of a project for the team, then maybe this is the solution.
Yeah, maybe so.
What is the fastest achievable response time in Laravel 9 in PHP 8.1 for a simple API project?
I know when we were benchmarking things on Laravel Vapor, the time spent in the Laravel framework was only like 1 millisecond or something like that. So the time spent in Laravel is actually very little compared to querying the database or making the HTTP request or the network jump between you and the server, things like that. So I don't know. With something like Laravel Vapor, you can achieve a lot of requests per second. And then if you're using Laravel Octane to keep your application in memory so that you don't have to reconnect to the database on every request, you can be very fast. But I don't know what the exact time would be, but quite fast. I would just benchmark it with Laravel Octane on your own machine and see what happens,
Here's another opinionated developer that thinks PHP is really bad. But I think we addressed this, so no need to go into that direction again. Tailwind versus Bootstrap. How successful is Vapor? Are there many people using serverless with Laravel?
Yeah, let me see. It's actually a fairly successful project, I would say. I'm pretty happy with it. Let me see if I can like get some real numbers of how many projects we have out there now. Let's see. So it looks like about 12,000 projects have been created. Let me see. So yeah, quite a few actually. It's more people use Vapor than use Envoyer actually. Although it's not quite as big as Forge. It's actually more people than I expected. And we've tried to make it. Recently, we released a free trial for Envoyer for Vapor, sorry, so that you can try Vapor without any payment or anything, because we wanted to make it easier for people to give it a shot. Because I think it actually is. My favorite way actually to deploy a Laravel project is probably using Vapor, and I wanted people to be able to try it. We also recently launched sort of a new onboarding wizard. After you make a Vapor account, it will walk you through creating a new Laravel project and deploying it to Vapor, and it will set up even GitHub actions to push to deploy to Laravel Vapor, so that when you push your code to GitHub, it will also trigger your Vapor deployment, and it configures all of that for you sort of in this wizard in Vapor. So if people haven't tried that out, definitely go try it, because you can sign up for free for a week or so and see what it's like. But I'm still really happy with how it turned out, and there's definitely a good number of people deploying Laravel projects on that platform.
That's great. Last question, and then we'll wrap up because we're running out of time. So with Lumen almost gone, what things would you consider or suggest when creating an API Laravel app?
I would just use Laravel. I think Lumen made sense when PHP, back when it was built, which was like PHP 5.4 or something like that. But after PHP 7 came out and now PHP 8, PHP is just much faster. And now with Laravel Octane, there's definitely no need to use something like Laravel Lumen for speed. So if you want it to be really fast, I would build it on Laravel and I would use Laravel Octane. And that would be my main suggestion. I've never used any of the other API packages like the GraphQL packages for Laravel or anything like that, so I can't give any recommendations there, but I definitely think that Laravel is fast enough for APIs, especially when you pair it with Octane.
Okay, let's wrap up here. Anything you want to share with people? Final thoughts?
No, thanks for having me. Thanks to everyone for asking questions. Thanks for using Laravel, and hopefully I'll see you at Laracon next year.
Oh, hope so too. Thank you too for accepting our invite. Hopefully we'll have you again not so soon so that we can have what to talk about. And yes, meet up on the conferences. Thanks to everyone who attended the event. There were some nice insights. If there's any student in the audience, feel free to reach out for discounts or any university professor who want to utilize that. And yeah, make sure to check out the Laravel ecosystem. There's always something interesting and exciting to dig into. Thanks again, Taylor. It was a pleasure to have you here today, and see you all again next month.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.